So today, as we move into our talk, let's just have a reminder that we are in June, the month of imagination, and we are in the last Sunday of June. And imagination is that ability to image, picture, conceptualize, envision, and dream. So today what I want to talk about is, there we go, is reimagining who you are, using that imagination, not just to imagine your life, not just to imagine things that you want or things that you would like to change, but to imagine who you are and to reimagine and reimagine and reimagine who you are. So for my centering thought for today, this is from Winifred, Wilkinson, Hausmann, and she wrote, "Within each person there is a new world waiting discovery, a world in which there are capabilities of unlimited strength, perfect knowing, radiant life, and other latent powers beyond our greatest present capacity to conceive." And that kind of reminded me of the idea of seek ye first the kingdom of God and its righteousness, and all else will be added to you. Because when we seek first that kingdom of God, when we maybe see first that kingdom of God, imagining that kingdom of God within us, that is how we bring together all of those other pieces of ourselves to create the most wonderful life, to be our most wonderful selves, to bring our most wonderful divine selves into the world. So that was sort of where my topic was going today. Like, what would it mean to my life? What would it mean to your life if we could simply see, always see that divine light within us? What would it mean to our lives as a community if we could always be only radiating that highest divine life into all of our interactions, into all of our ways of being in the world, into all of the gifts that we bring into the world? How would that change things? How would that move things? And when I was thinking about this, and the song was such a powerful, especially the video for that song too, was such a powerful reminder for me that it's not just about having everything turn out good all the time. Linda Martella-Whitsett, this is from Divine Audacity, writes, "My intention is that we become so aware of our spiritual nature and capacities that we walk through unwanted circumstances in the same way we walk through wanted circumstances, shining the light all the while. Our divine identity can be our first resource rather than our last resort." Our divine identity can be our first resource rather than being our last resort. And isn't that exactly what that means, to seek first the kingdom of God? Isn't that what that means? It means that we go to our divine light as our first resource always. And so this became kind of present for me over the past couple weeks when I was at the convention, and of course I started feeling not good towards the end of the convention, and got a fever, and I ended up, of course you all know the story already, I delayed my travel plans coming back because I just wasn't able to drive on Friday like I had planned to do. And then on Saturday I woke up feeling like, okay, I can do this, I can drive. And so I got in the car and drove. And all of the while I was driving, both on Saturday and Sunday, one of the things that kept going through my mind periodically was, what if I'm not okay to cross the border? What happens then? I don't even know exactly. I mean, I filled out my my ArriveCAN app on on my phone. I filled it out, did all the things that I was supposed to do on Saturday morning. And on Saturday morning, it asked the question, do you have a fever? And I didn't have a fever Saturday morning. So I thought, okay, I'm good to say, no, I don't have a fever. So that's fine. So I went ahead, but I kept having this coming back in the back of my mind. What if they stop me at the border and say, have you been in contact with people with COVID? Because by that time I had learned that yes, a lot of people at the convention got COVID. So what I did was I returned to my divine identity. What I did was I took that 2 days worth of driving to affirm and remember who I am. And when you take a look at the 12 powers, it's interesting to me. I do believe that the imagination, for me, it feels like it's got to be the first. And I know in the order of months, it's faith comes first, but for me, imagination comes before faith. I have to place something in my imagination to have faith in. I have to see it in my imagination, and perhaps that's just me because I feel like I'm a fairly visual person. I have to be able to see it first, and when I can see it in my mind's eye, then I can throw the weight of my faith behind it. Then I can throw my personal power behind it. Then I can throw my strength behind it and move through it that way. But imagination seems to be, for me, the first thing. So as I was in my driving time, I was thinking to myself, well, what divine power, what is the power that I need to be resting in this moment? What is the power that I need to be bringing forth as I move through this time if I am to make this successful trip home? And so the power that was my power to work on was imagination. And so I spent 2 days imagining every cell in my body radiating the light of Christ. And that was the word I was using, the light of Christ. The phrase, that I was using. The light of Christ is within every cell of my body. The light of Christ radiates from within every cell of my body, that it is every cell of my body, that it is every part of me. It is every part of my energy body that is around my physical body. It is every part of my spiritual and etheric bodies that are around my physical body, that every part of me is radiating the light of Christ. Every part of me is empowered by and empowered with the light of Christ. Every part of me is in wholeness and in oneness as the light of Christ in the world. And I kept repeating that, and I kept repeating that, and I kept repeating that. And you know what? My drive was fantastic. I had a delightful drive. I wasn't tired at all. After the first 5-hour section, which was the shorter section, I thought, oh, I could have gone another couple hours. It was easy. And it felt really good. And I felt really strong. And I felt really powerful. And so then the next day, I did the same thing for my entire drive between South Dakota and Winnipeg. I did the same thing, just reaffirming and reaffirming and reaffirming that I am the light of Christ. I am the light of Christ. Every part of me is the light of Christ. And then I got home. And see, this is what we do. We allow our imaginations, when we focus our imaginations on those things that are how we choose to be in the world, everything is easy. I flew past the border super easy. The man didn't ask me. All he asked me is, where were you? I said, at a convention. He said, was it good? I said, it was great. And he said, okay, goodbye. That was it. It was super easy. And so I got home, and then I looked at my convention app to see, well, have a lot of other people said that they were sick, and what happened there. And do you see what I did? I went from being the light of Christ to being more interested in sickness. I went from simply living the light of Christ in every cell of my body to imagining all the people that were experiencing COVID. So the next morning, when Steph brought home the rapid test, When I was driving, I was like, oh, that rapid test coming clear. I'm not even going to have COVID. There's not even going to be any COVID in my body. No way, no how. But by the next morning, when I took the rapid test, there she was. There it was, showing clear as day. And I haven't felt ill. I've been feeling good all week. You may still notice I have a bit of a scratchiness in my throat a little bit, but nothing major. And I've had great energy, and it's been all good. But I did really clearly see how that shifting from seeking first the kingdom of God, the light of Christ is within me, imagining, using that innate power of imagination for my health and for my good and for the good of all of those around me, I switched into a focus on something that is less health-like. And that became my experience in a small way. And I did continue to do my spiritual work through the week on that, but this is a really powerful thing. When we train our minds to use those innate powers that we have, when we choose our thoughts powerfully and consciously, we have an immense amount of, an unfathomable amount of divine energy that moves into what it is that we choose. So that was my experience of this week. Now I want to move a little bit further into this, because there's a great quote by Einstein. He says, a human being is part of the whole called the universe. We experience ourselves as something separated from the rest, a kind of optical delusion in consciousness. This delusion is a kind of prison for us, restricting us. Our task is to free ourselves from optical delusions. And that's what I noticed with my whole experience was the optical delusion of coming back to reality. You know, all of that time that I was driving, that I was in the light, that was the reality. But yet I came home and looked at my Hoover app and somehow declared in my mind that that was the reality. What is real, though? What is the real truth? There's this beautiful allegory by Plato called the allegory of the cave, and a lot of people have talked about this. I'm gonna sort of abbreviate it a little bit, but what it is that Plato is telling this story. It's like a conversation between Socrates and Plato's nephew, I think it is, brother, sorry, Glaucon. And so the way it goes is that Socrates says to Plato's brother, imagine if there was this group of people who had, from like all of their lives pretty much, been kept in a cave, chained to a wall, facing the wall, so that all they could see was the wall in front of them. But behind them, outside of the cave, there was light coming in, and there was maybe some fires happening for light, and there's shadows. And there are people that carry puppets in front of the shadows of all different shapes and sizes. And all of the noises that are heard are echoes of those people outside who are casting shadows. And so the people that are in the cave, all of their lives, all they've known is the shadows on the wall, and they think that that is their reality. And they infer what that means. They set up stories in their minds, mostly stories of fear, because they don't know what these shadows mean, and they can't really hear the voices that are out there. They just sort of hear some noises, and so everything feels very scary and feels very dark and shadowy to them. And so they do their whole life like this, having this experience of fear, of using their imagination for fearful means. But what if one day one of those people was taken out of the cave, Now, the first thing that would happen is his eyes would get blinded by the light that's outside of the cave, and he wouldn't be able to see. But once he finally was able to see, it might have been a painful experience even to get to that point of being able to see. But once he could really see clearly, he would suddenly come to realize that everything he had known was not reality, and that this outside world was reality. And well, what do you think would happen then? Socrates asks. And the person said, well, he'd probably want to go and save the other people. He would feel bad for those other people and he'd want to go save them. And so, yes, he'd go in back down into the cave, but back down into the cave, it was dark in there. And so he wouldn't be able to see again for a while. And he'd be trying to explain to people what he saw in the outside world, but he wouldn't be able to explain it in a way that they could understand. And they would laugh at him and say, look at you, you're a mess. You can't see anything. And you're telling us fanciful tales of something that isn't even real. And so they might not even believe him. But it would be incumbent upon him as the one who knows the truth to come back and tell them and teach them. So the idea behind all this, Socrates says, is that it appears to me, in the realm of what can be known, the idea of good is often discovered last of all. And it's only perceived with great difficulty. But when it is seen, it leads us directly to the finding that it is the universal cause of all that is right and beautiful. The idea of good is the universal cause of all that is right and beautiful. It is the source of visible light and the master of the same. And in the intelligible world, it is the master of truth and reason. And whoever, in private or public, would behave in a sensible way will keep this idea in focus. And so what Socrates is saying in this is that the person who has seen that light cannot go back to only believing in the shadows. They can't, because if they go back to just believing in the shadows, they shrink and they suffer. But when they believe in the light, they also have to be able to speak the light. They also have to be able to tell people about it. And somehow they have to translate what that means, that there is this thing that is beyond our knowing here. And this is who we all are. We're all in that cave. We're all growing in that cave, knowing that all we have seen all of our lives is just a shadow. All that we see in our experience is just a shadow of the reality, which is the divine, which is that light of Christ, which is the everything and the allness that is beyond us, that is everything. And so we are that light that is outside of the cave, but we are also the shadow that's in the cave. We're also the ones who are evolving out of the cave. And we get to choose how we use our imagination. So now just think about it this way. If those people who were in the cave, when the person came from the outside, if instead of doggedly insisting that reality was the shadow in front of them, if instead they had recognized that maybe that person who came from that other place has seen something, and if they could catch their imagination onto that, how would that change things for them? Well, one of the things that I would bet is that they would realize that the chains were also an illusion. I had a dog, my very first dog. Her name was Sherlock. She was very sweet. We lived in a condo with side-by-side bungalow condo. And we had a big yard, but because it was a condo corporation, you couldn't have fences or anything. So we had her on a clothesline leash in the backyard. When she was out there with us, she'd be on the leash. And so she got used to having a certain perimeter with that clothesline leash. And she grew up that way. From a young puppy, she grew up that way. And there was this dog that a person used to come walking with down our back sidewalk. And it was always like lunging at her and was not a friendly dog at all. And so as she grew up, she grew to dislike this dog immensely. Well, then there was one day when, after a couple of years of that leash being out in the sun, it got brittle and it broke. It broke right at the moment when that other person was coming walking with their dog down the sidewalk. And our little Sherlock took off across the lawn and stopped, even though the leash was broken, stopped right where the leash would have ended and paced up and down and patrolled her territory. There was no leash, but she still believed it to be so. She still imagined that she was chained to the wall in the cave. We always continue to imagine that we are still bound by all of these untruths that we have lived with all of our lives, that we grew up with. But we have the ability to imagine something different. And so this is where this idea of imagination is so very powerful to us. This idea of imagination can take us from being the smaller self, the person chained in the cave, to being the divine light that we are, being the one who is shining into the cave, our glory, our truth, our understanding of the real reality that is beyond all of it. And so instead of just imagining our good, what I am wanting us to think about today is imagining that we are the good. Imagining that we are the light. Imagining that we are what we want to see brought out into the world. Because we are. We are that. We are that in form. And there is no other way for God to express itself in this life except for by means of us. And we are that. We are that. So whatever is in my experience is mine to express into. Whatever I am seeing in the world around me is mine to be in the way that the divine is so gloriously, so powerfully willing to be, through and as me, because it is me. Imagination is that first of all the 12 powers for me, like I said. It's that part of me that allows me to imagine that I can use all of the other 12 powers for good in this world, for my good, for the good of all those around me, for the good of the world itself. I'm going to show you one more quote. Well, actually, it's two more, but it's one page. First is Charles Fillmore. The highest and best work of the imagination is the marvelous transformation that it works in character. Imagine that you are one with the principle of good, and you will become truly good. Just simply imagine it. And then again from Linda Martello-Whitsitt, we can imagine ourselves into our true nature and assert our greatest spiritual capacities. And this is what I choose. This is what I choose for me, and this is what I hope for us. So let's end this on an affirmation. I engage my power of imagination as I keep my inner vision focused on the divine nature present in all of my experience. And so it is. May life bless you abundantly. May grace and goodness walk with you every day. May love and joy expand within you, and may you know peace. Go in peace.